Hey everybody, how's it going? So, first off, welcome. I hope you guys had a good week so far. I hope everything going well as far as e-learning and all. Before we get started, what we're doing today, I want to go over one quick thing. The assignments from that first week of e-learning, so it's like March 16th through the 20th. Those were due last night at midnight, so I will hopefully have those graded and in PowerSchool by this weekend. So if you check and see something's not right, you think you did something that, whatever it may be, let me know. That way I can look into it and see if I can fix it. Otherwise, we will get started with what is going on behind me. Before we do that, let me pull up the screen. There we go. So we are going to be going over what is called the Great Migration and this city called Great Zimbabwe. Now, before we get too far in this, here's what you should be able to tell me, understand by the end of all this. You should be able to understand the effects of the Bantu migration, who they were, why they did it, that kind of thing, and what kind of impact those had as far as political, social, cultural, things we've talked about before. We're going to be looking at some of the theories as to why the Bantu peoples decided to move from their original homeland in West Africa. We're going to describe the trading and political systems of the Mutapa Kingdom and their city at Great Zimbabwe, and then we are going to look at what led to their decline and what happened in this area after they were no longer here. So first things first, we're going to look at who are these people. So you will hear this called a couple of different things, but I'm going to call it the Great Migration, and it is the migration of the Bantu-speaking peoples from their native homelands and what is today the modern countries people that experts believe of Cameroon and Nigeria. So right along here along the Niger River. They began moving in fairly large groups from this area south and southeast towards what's now the DRC, the Congo River Basin. And then some of them went further east into what is now the eastern part of Africa, Somalia, Sudan, that region. It's often referred to as the Great Lakes region of Africa because there are several large lakes here. This idea of a migration is just simply a large group of people for whatever reason moving out of their homeland to somewhere else. So experts believe around 1000 CE, these Bantu groups began migrating south and southeast. Now, they're not exactly sure why, but there are a few theories that we're going to look at here shortly. So how do we know that these people even began migrating? So a lot of what historians base their knowledge off of is this idea of linguistic evidence. A lot of the religions in sub-Saharan Africa, so areas south of the Sahara Desert, are very similar. They're not identical, but there's enough similarities to make historians and language experts believe these are related somehow. Across sub-Saharan Africa in general, there are between 300 to 600 different ethnic groups that speak some form of the original language of the Bantu people. And these are spread across the continent into South Africa, Ethiopia. Just every country has some ethnic group that speaks a form of this language. And these languages are very similar to make experts think that these are all related to one single religion or language. Now, they haven't been able to prove this definitively for a couple of reasons. They haven't been able to track the various languages back to their source, so they can't figure out how to track where it came from. There isn't a lot of archaeological evidence, things left behind to support this idea, but they believe there's enough language evidence in it, the way these different groups speak, that they believe that is related to this idea of this great migration of the Bantu people. Now, why did these people just get up and leave? So again, there is no definite answer to this. There are a couple leading theories, though, as to why this happened. The first one being that climate change in the Sahara Desert led to a decreasing food and water supply. Now, at one point, thousands of years ago, the Sahara Desert wasn't actually a desert. It was a fairly fertile grassland area. And over the course of time, it slowly began evaporating and eventually comes to be known what we know today as the Sahara Desert. At one point, experts believe that the desert wasn't as big as it was. And so as this desert began changing climatically, the Bantu people began moving out. It's one theory. Another theory is that there was a sudden increase in the population of the Bantu people. They became too crowded where they were living at the time, and they needed to move to find more space. They began moving south into southern Africa and then east into the Great Lakes region of Africa, the east coast of Africa. Again, it's not 100% proven, but that is one theory that experts believe as to possibly as to why this migration actually happened. Another leading theory is that there were a series of tribal wars within the Bantu people themselves and with their neighbors in West Africa, and that kind of forced their hand as far as needing to move. So one theory is that these Bantu peoples, for war-related reasons, what have you, had to move somewhere else to find a spot. Now, there are more theories related to this, but those are the three leading theories among historians and other experts as to why these people decided they needed to move. Now, what does this mean for Southern Africa? What are the effects of this? So as these Bantu people began moving into central, southern, and parts of Eastern Africa, they encountered native people only, people that were already there. So these Bantu people either had to do a couple of things. They had to blend in with the current culture group that was there, a word known as assimilate. They had to combine their culture with the others and create this new one. They had to fight the native people that were there, or warfare. The Bantu people were known through archaeological evidence of having advanced forms of iron weaponry. So it wasn't too crazy of an idea for these Bantu people to come in and potentially just remove by force the people that were already there. They also had the option of adopting the native culture completely, letting go of all their own and slowly adapting to the native culture, adapting farming practices, raising different animals. That theory is one that I tend to believe to be more prevalent. There are instances of the Bantu coming in and just simply removing people by force. But a lot of this, and this goes back to the language thing we just talked about, is they kind of mixed and matched things. The Bantu kind of kept some of their own things and adopted some of the native people's ideas, cultures, what have you. And then the native peoples also did the same thing. They adopted some of the Bantu ideas. And so you have that kind of blending, or what you'll often hear called assimilation. Now, it wasn't full assimilation, meaning one side just gave up everything. It was more of a half and half, as far as bits and pieces of it were adopted, bits and pieces were left behind, what have you. The map on your screen here kind of shows you the different language groups that you can find. The one that we need to be paying attention to is this orange one down here. That is the languages that are related to the Bantu groups who migrated in this area. Now, I said that not every native group adopted the Bantu ideas entirely. This green area down here, this Khoisan language group, that is one of the native groups that refused and managed to maintain their own sense of identity, and that they were able to kind of preserve their native cultures, their practices, religions, languages, that kind of thing. Their language is actually a very, very unique in that it involves a lot of clicking noises. We may show a video. I may have a video, watch you guys a video of it at some point, but we won't do it today. But if you watch it, they will actually speak with a series of tongue clicks, and it's very interesting to listen to them try and say things. But for our purposes, the only one we need to be really concerned with for this lesson is this orange one here, this Niger-Congo language tree. Now, as the Bantu kind of moved into different areas, different tribal groups began kind of moving in and establishing themselves as far as powerful kingdoms and empires in the region. One of them that we are going to focus on is actually the people who built what is behind me on the screen, this city known as Great Zimbabwe. Is actually developed in the capital of the Shona Kingdom. Sometimes you'll see them called the Mutapa Kingdom. And they were a leading economic kingdom in the eastern portions of Southern Africa, in what's today Mozambique and Zimbabwe. So that eastern coast of Southern Africa. Now, their capital was at the city of Great Zimbabwe, which the picture behind me is actually a picture of the ruins of what is there today. Obviously, over time and through different things, it's kind of fallen in disrepair a bit. But as of today, that is what the former site of Great Zimbabwe looks like. So the Mutapa Kingdom was able to develop this control at Great Zimbabwe through their control of the surrounding gold and ivory trade. This region, like a lot of southern and parts of East Africa, is very rich in mineral and other natural resources. And these people, through Great Zimbabwe, the Shona, were able to control large portions of the gold and then the ivory trade in this region. Now, the gold is kind of obvious as far as what it's worth, what you do with it, that kind of thing. Ivory is it's unique. The amount of things that you can do with ivory are very interesting, and it's an issue that now the poaching of ivory, the gathering of ivory from elephants is illegal in most corners of the world. Yet the ivory trade is still a very big business in portions of Asia. China is a big consumer of ivory through different material, different avenues. But the Mutapa Kingdom was able to control the gold and ivory trade in their region, and this made them extremely wealthy and influential in terms of political, even militarily wise. They were able to kind of extort themselves across the peoples in this region. And they based their capital at Great Zimbabwe, which again is what is behind me on the screen. That is what their capital kind of looks like now. And just to give you guys an idea of what this looks like and where it is. So here with the stars where the city is, obviously it is in the modern country of Zimbabwe. And it is very close to Botswana, South Africa, and then Mozambique along the coast here. So being landlocked, it relies on its neighbors for trading access to the Indian Ocean down here. And the Shona kingdoms were able to interact with Muslim traders from Arabia to get their product, the gold, ivory, and other resources from Great Zimbabwe here to the markets where they were wanted and sold. To give you ideas of what this looks like, as far as besides what's behind me, this is the inside of it, and that is kind of an aerial view of what Great Zimbabwe would have looked like. And then it is also marked as a World Heritage Site, meaning it's been marked for preservation for future generations to kind of see. So if you find yourself in this part of the world, you should, if it's maintained the way it's expected, be able to visit this city, visit the ruins, and just see what it was like. Some place I have not been. I know people who have, and they say it is a very interesting place, something worth checking out. But just want to give you guys a quick idea of what this looked like. So, what else is Great Zimbabwe known for besides the gold trade? It's known as, the name Great Zimbabwe, for starters, is a Shona word meaning Great Walled Town. It was founded around the year 1100. And as we discussed in the previous slide, it became a center of gold and ivory trade in the region. Now, at its peak, it had a population of anywhere between 15 and 20,000 people. That's not, doesn't seem like a lot in today's standards when you have cities of 8 or 9 million. But 15 to 20,000 people is about, I think of I'm not really sure what you can compare that to, but it's a fairly good sized city today. I mean, it wouldn't be considered huge, but to have 15 to 20,000 people in a single area at this point in time, around the 1200s, it was a very large city. Around 1500, the city of Great Zimbabwe in the Shona or Mutapa Kingdom began declining, and soon the city was a series of ruins similar to what you see behind me. When European archaeologists found this area when they were exploring and later colonizing this region, they found evidence of Chinese porcelain and other artifacts that showed that these people had been trading with people as far away as China even. Now, the reason why I bring this up is, again, typical with how Europeans interacted and saw native cultures in Africa. They looked at this as, looked down and said, there's no way these people could build this. There's no way they could trade with all these different people. But we have direct evidence that proves that these people were trading either directly or indirectly with people as far away as China, which is very important to know. Not everything. Oftentimes, the way the Europeans looked at native Africans was completely wrong and not even close to what was actually happening. So it's important to note that these people had their own culture, civilization, what have you, and were trading extensively with other groups in the world. So what happened to this area after Great Zimbabwe and the Shona kind of disappeared? So soon afterwards, European explorers, primarily Dutch, Portuguese, and the British, began exploring and eventually would colonize the region and its native peoples. Similar to what we saw with Central and West Africa even. At first, it was the Dutch who would settle in areas of the Cape of Good Hope, down in the southern part of Africa, and would eventually become known as Afrikaners. So eventually, around 1800, the British would remove the Dutch from the region, and the remaining Dutch who resisted this British push would become known as Boers. And eventually, this movement of the Dutch Boers from their original cities along the coast of southern Africa into the central part of the region, Namibia, Botswana, that area, it led to a series of conflicts between the Dutch and the native peoples, and then also the Dutch and the British. And a series of wars would be fought between these different groups vying for control of the region. It would be known as the Great Boers Wars. And we're going to look at those a little bit more next week as far as what that means for Southern Africa and all. But here's what you'll be doing for this e-learning assignment for Thursday. It's on the Canvas module marked for Thursday, April 9th. It's 5 short answer questions relating to stuff we've went over in this PowerPoint. As always, if you took notes, use those, rewatch the video that I just did, or just look back over the PowerPoint. I'll have all the video and the PowerPoint uploaded into the module so you guys can go back and look over it. So assignments for Thursday e-learnings will always be due the following Monday by 8 a.m. on Canvas. So that means this one will be due this coming Monday, April 13th. So, and again, if you guys have any questions or issues accessing the module, something won't open, or just have general questions about the assignment, send me a message through either email or Canvas, and I will see what I can do to get it going for you. Otherwise, I hope you guys have a good weekend. If you need help, email me, and otherwise I will see you all on Monday, hopefully.